more. Um, we'll talk about news media, and then we'll discuss effective use of the news media to spread evidence-based intervention, some tips that we could use to do that. We'll conclude, and then there will be time for questions. So, who am I? I started my pharmacy journey in Ghana, and in Ghana, my professors kept telling me at the time I was a student that I was at the wrong place and that I should have gone to the School of Journalism. The reason being that I became a student editor and I was so much interested in writing, editing, writing, and we published magazine also. So after school, I worked as a drug information pharmacist with the National Drug Information Resource Center. And during that time, I used to do a program on TV, do some work on radio, writing for newspapers. And then, as if to prove my professor's rights, I ended up getting two master's degrees in communication, one in development communication from the Philippines, and then another one in science and technology journalism from Texas A&M University, before I did my doctorate in public health with a focus on health promotion and community sciences. So basically, my research looks more into dissemination and implementation of particularly health communication interventions. I do also have experience with editing articles, news media articles, especially for Sub-Saharan Africa. So I am so excited to be the one discussing the aspect of disseminating information using the news media with you. The news media, as you know, can be from several channels, but there are three key ones: radio, television, and newspapers. These are very, very key for reaching practitioners and policymakers. And not only these people, but even members of the public in general. The news media also is known for setting the agenda. What do we mean by setting the agenda? You will know that at any given time, we have a lot of issues in this world. And yet, the news media may decide to highlight particular ones. So as they highlight particular issues more and more and more, it becomes as if that is the most important thing in this world. So the media can help set the agenda. What does that tell us? If we have a health issue and the media doesn't highlight it, it may not catch the attention of key people, including policymakers. But as we get to them, the media, and they highlight them, this is likely to lead to, people being aware and thinking that, oh, that is a big issue. An example, when COVID hit the world, many health stories went down. In fact, even people who were not doing health stories were suddenly writing up, reporting on COVID. So COVID was setting the agenda. And so sometimes also, we may not have something like that, but media may decide to highlight particular things based on their own interest. Now, studies have also shown that several gaps remain, regarding, using the news media to guide, dissemination of evidence-based interventions. There are several gaps. Part of the reason is that there are instances when you find that people with expertise in communication are not working directly or, even indirectly with those who generate the evidence. And so the use of media for disseminating evidence-based interventions happens to be something that is not often done. And if it's done also, probably not done very well. So we have to do something about it. And that is why today's seminar is really key. And we hope that after this, you'll be able to find ways to address part of these gaps. Now, If we have to use this, if we have to use the news media to spread evidence-based interventions, one tip is that we have to know why we should catch policymakers and practitioners. And by the use of catch, I want to see policymakers or practitioners more as, let me use this example, as fish, okay? To me, I love fish. Fish happens to be the first word I learned to pronounce as a kid, according to my late mother. And so sometimes I use it a lot in my own analogies. I also like eating fish, by the way. So if we consider policymakers and practitioners as a fish, we have to do something about it. But first of all, as we know, policymakers and practitioners may not necessarily be the primary target of scholarly papers. Unfortunately, many evidence-based interventions get disseminated through scholarly papers. Now, the beneficiaries of interventions often are target of news media. The people who benefit more from interventions may consume media, obviously, far more than those that may focus on scholarly papers. It is common to hear something like, I heard it on radio. And so news media, for example, could be key to spreading interventions if we do use it very, very well. Now, again, looking at the policymakers or practitioners as the fish, we now know why we have to catch them. We have to catch them because they are the one that eventually will help promote the uptake of interventions. If there is no funding to promote something, no matter how good it is, it might not get promoted. And you know, policymakers are the ones who end up also footing the bill in terms of making sure the right money is used. Practitioners also may be so busy, but they can hear something on radio, television, or newspapers. And so using the media to do that is going to be very, very helpful. Now, we have to know where to catch policymakers. Now, as I said, let's consider policymakers and practitioners as the fish. As you know, there are different water bodies through which, you find fish. We have a lot of them. The one you are seeing now is like fish farming. It's a small fish farming that a farmer wants to probably have some fish in there. So the question is, if you put something into the mass media, you have to know what type of mass media, the kind of people you hope to get their attention, are likely to access more, okay? So you have to know the type of water body that you have to catch the fish. Now, let's say you have identified the water body that you're going to use to catch the fish. Your next trip then is to know the baits that can hook policymakers and practitioners. Okay? Now, you say something like radio, television, newspapers. Let's use, for example, radio. What kind of program on radio could potentially engage the priority audience? Or in this case, for example, policymakers and practitioners. So I'm using the baits as the type of programming that we can identify and catch the attention of the policymakers and practitioners. Okay, so some programs are like call-in programs where people phone in and tell something. Sometimes we can use drama. I have designed drama interventions, for example, where we put a drama on radio, a serial drama, educating people on particular health issues. and things like that. So there are different components, different types of programming that we can use to catch the attention of policymakers. You see, sometimes policymakers could be very, very, I would say, excuse my word, stubborn. They may see something, they may hear something, but they may not pay much attention. As they get into the mass media, as those things get into the mass media and the masses begin to talk about it, it will now catch their attention. So once you know what type of bait you could use to catch them, then you can be very, very effective. But you also have to know when to catch them, when to catch policymakers and practitioners. Timing is very, very important, especially sometimes during election time, when they now pay more attention to the masses. If the masses are complaining about particular interventions or things like that, they could be more interested in it. But also, when you have the option of involving the media in your work, you have to consider timing that can lead to more people actually getting exposed to your intervention. For example, if you have an option of launching a program on Monday so that it will be on the news, let's say on Monday or Tuesday, or if you have a program that you have an option of launching it on Friday with the hope that it will come on air or it will be available on that Friday or Saturday. In general, you may find that there are some particular days that a lot more people may get more exposed to the intervention, to mass media. So if you plan very, very well, it is possible that you could end up having a program that will be very successful because a lot more people will be aware of it. So timing is very important for the media, but also it's also important for the key people you hope to engage. Get help from your organization if available. And this is something that in Africa, we haven't done a very, very good job of it. We have a lot of people who are communicators. We have media professionals. These are people with masters, PhD, bachelors in communication who are not necessarily working with public health or academic institutions. But we can have those people to serve as people who would enable researchers to disseminate their work. For example, in the United States, where I am based right now, when we publish in journals, for example, the organizations that we work for will get to us and sometimes even get a press release from it and give it to the media. And media then publicizes it. So it is something that we are not doing it very well in Africa. And if such people are available, we have to make use of them. If there isn't one available, there's a need for us to advocate for at least one for our organization so that they can help us use the media effectively. We also have to prepare for media interviews. My first experience as a person to be interviewed on using media happened when I was a pharmacy student, and I was then a student editor. We published a story on different types of snoring, and so the media was interested in it and they interviewed me on it. It wasn't easy, even though on radio people are not seeing you. I was just shivering because that was my first experience with that. Now, in general, we need to prepare for media interviews. But even before the practical aspect, there are a few things that we have to know. When is the story going to be published? What is the story about, what is the focus of the story? And who else may be interviewed for the story? If a journalist wants to interview you for story, these are things that if the person didn't provide you with, you may want to be asking. For example, if good reporters typically would interview more than one person for a story. So if you are a researcher and somebody wants to get some information from you for a story, and you also know the person is going to say going to interview a policymaker, you don't have to bring in too much of policy in your work. You have to focus more on the research. So different people will be talking about the same thing, but with different angles. So you have to know the focus of the story, you know the deadline. Knowing the deadline is very, very important. In fact, I wanted to write a story and I sent an email to a researcher years ago. The person didn't reply it until about 3 months later, and he said, oh, he was busy and now he has come back. So sorry, the story has been published already. So you have to know the deadline so that you will know how to prioritize. Now, you have to develop what you call a single overriding head communication objective that could serve as a soundbite. So here, you should focus on the most important thing about the intervention that you would like people and policymakers to know about. So if you are being interviewed for a particular topic or something like that, you have to have an idea of all the things I'm going to say, what is going to be the most important one that I want people to know about. Think about that, and then if you do that well, you will make a great impression. Sorry. Speak in non-technical language. In Africa, if we speak with big English, sometimes we think that, yeah, that is it. In fact, there is a story of someone who said, who was trying to show off to people that he's well known. So he said, I am very notorious. He wanted to say I am famous, not thinking that, of course, notorious means famous for doing something bad. So big words sometimes wouldn't work very well when you are speaking about science. So we have to speak in non-technical language. Then also we have to avoid the use of acronyms. We tend to use that a lot when we are speaking with our colleagues, but certainly with speaking in the media, we want to do our best to avoid the use of acronyms. Unless a particular acronym is well known, we should definitely avoid that. Now, we also have to answer questions very well. And here, one way to do that is to elaborate on some key points. Sometimes people have a tendency of providing a yes or no type of answers. But if we want to engage the media very well, we need to do our best to provide good responses that are just not yes or no. We have to explain the yes or no situations. Now, we also have to use the inverted pyramid approach. Now, the inverted pyramid is the opposite of the typical convention that we use in scientific writing or communication. How is this like? Now, for a typical scientific study or paper, you find that we have what you call IMRAD, introduction, methods, result, and discussion. Some have different variations, but it follows in this format. Rationale is about, introduction talks about why did we have to do the research, methods, what did we do, result, what did we find, discussion, implications of the result. So this is how a typical scientific paper flows. In inverted pyramid approach, we turn it upside down. So here, the most important information is put first, and then other details can come, and maybe some general information could be given. So if we have an evidence-based intervention that we know works, and based on studies, we have published them, and a journalist approaches you to know about it, you want to go straight into what were your key findings and why should people care about it? If we provide that kind of information, journalists will be so happy. They will be so happy. But sometimes we scientists, we tend to talk about, oh, in the past, we were not having this, and we felt there was a need for it. And so, like, those things are very good and could definitely come in at some point, but you don't really want to focus too much on that in your interactions with the media, unless, of course, the rationale is a major focus of the study. So, those of us in the media, we like the so what approach. Okay, so your study has shown that this is effective. So what? What happens next? Those are things that as you go further to engage with the media, you need to consider talking to them. And then also, we have the time factor. Sometimes when people are giving like 5 minutes or 7 minutes to make presentations, and you say, oh, I know, it's not much. Really? If you have even 1 minute with the media, you know what that can do? Advertisement for 1 minute, depending on the prime time, can be very expensive. So if you have a time to engage with the media, make use of that time very, very well, no matter how small it is. We also have what we call audience factor. People may be exposed to so many things around the same time. And so you can't be talking about the same issue for a very long time or writing on something for a long, long time. Sometimes when you read a particular newspaper article, it's so long and you don't have even key points that you like short subtitles and stuff like that. Sometimes it just put off people. So you want to really make sure you can engage your audience well. So because of this, then of course the inverted pyramid is a very, very good approach for engaging with the audience. So in order to use the inverted pyramid approach, you have to sell the most important findings of your research and why people should care about the result. And again, don't focus too much on the rationale and the methods unless they are the focus of the media output. What is the benefit of using news media to spread evidence-based interventions? Members of the public typically will get exposed to your intervention. Sometimes a great intervention will be available, but even the people who actually should benefit from it may not be aware of it. Through the media, they will become aware. Also, peers and other researchers get exposed to your interventions, and this could likely increase citation. Studies show that articles that get media attention in general are more likely to get higher citations than those that do not get media attention. The reason being that the media, if you talk of it as a type of, like water body, there are many fish that will stay in it. So in that case, for example, you find that if something comes on the radio, it is not only members of the public who are listening to it, but also you have researchers also getting to know about the results, so they can then become aware of it. Same as that for policymakers and practitioners. And that can lead to potential uptake for interventions. More and more funders are also recognizing the impact of disseminating results through the mass media or some other outlet as well. And so if you do that, then you can check the box for these kind of funders. So in general, using the mass media for spreading interventions require an approach which is different from that for journals. Now, if you pay attention to the tips and use them appropriately, you are likely to reap the benefits, especially more. Okay. Yeah, so thank you so much. And I will be happy to answer questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Appiah. Thank you so much. So please, let's start putting our questions in the Q&A so that we can ask him. So let's start with my own question. So my question is, this is very tough, a very interesting presentation, but I'm wondering, would this work with our policymakers in our African countries? For instance, in Nigeria, we know that the budget for healthcare is abysmal. And we have interventions that are proven to improve the quality of life of our patients and increase positive health outcomes for our patients. How do we sell these? What is the bait? What's the best kind of bait? What's the best kind of bait for those people sitting in Abuja?
Thank you. Very good question. You see, I would say that in general, one approach is not enough. Media is one, but we can use media to complement the other approaches. In the case of politicians, yes, if a lot of media are talking about the same thing at a given time, right? It will definitely get to them. And they may be forced to do something. The issue is when it's, people just talk about it on one or two occasions and something else comes and stuff like that. So the idea of using the media to set an agenda could be very useful if the media is consistent. And to have consistency in messaging, you need to have people who are dedicated. There are some media professionals who are more interested in covering health issues. Some of them would be very happy to keep following up. So there are instances when a politician will go and say somewhere that we are going to do this, we are going to do that. The media covers it. Media that are very, very strong in ensuring things are done would then have follow-up. They will follow up, oh, about a month or about 6 months or last year you said, what happened? So if they do that, and then there are also programs where members of the public can call in, they will spread their views and stuff like that. It may catch their attention and hopefully that could be helpful. But we can also consider having policy briefs in addition to that, so that, they don't have to necessarily listen to only media together. That's why I initially said, multiple approaches may be very helpful. Thanks.
Okay, my second question, there are questions already coming in. So, but I wanted to ask a second question, which is, you told us, the traditional methodology is the IMRAD approach, but you taught us or taught me something new today about the inverted triangle. So does that
Pyramid.
mean that if you want to ensure success with putting out your science to the public or getting your message across to non-health population, that it must be the inverted triangle that's more likely to guarantee you success than our usual IMRAD methodology?
Good question. So the inverted pyramid ensures that the most important message comes first before the others come. And it is strategic and very important because people's attention span can be very, very small. And people don't want to read for a very long time. So if you didn't put the most important information first, you are not likely to have someone actually get your main message. Now, if you are going to read a scientific paper and you begin with your introduction, with the methods and all that, you haven't even gotten to the key findings, right? And so if you use that approach in scientific writing, or communication, and you use it for engaging with members of the public to the media, your most important messages could be lost, and you may not be able to achieve your major aim. So you want to make sure you invert the pyramid and make sure that the most important information comes first.
First. Okay, so there's another question for you. Dr. Maureen Umakwewulu is thanking you for a wonderful presentation and say, could you please elaborate on how we can create increased awareness for our articles on social media?
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, social media is a different approach also, but the same way of getting different people. So with social media, you have to know, for example, some key people who may have large following. Followers buy into your idea. That could be one strategy where you can use. Now, if you are not using that and you want to do it yourself also, one thing you can do is that you have to learn how to write in very short sentences and paragraphs that won't be too long. And then if you publish something, you have to tweet. For example, X, now instead of Twitter, we have X, and so you have to put it on X, for example, for people to be aware. On Facebook, you can have a brief information about what you have done. What I have seen being done effectively in some instances is that some organizations have social media engagement specialists. So they try to help researchers publicize their work. So if sometimes a paper has been published, those people will use social media to now highlight it. Or even you can create something on TikTok. You can learn how to do that. But as you know, researchers, we are so much busy doing research to the extent that sometimes the communication aspect we don't have much time for it. And partly because researchers usually don't get promoted for the kind of information they put out there on social media, or on radio or television. Although I would say over the past few years, there have been some attention to, putting, for those people who are going up for tenure and promotion and tenure, for example, they can indicate the number of times they have been engaging the media and stuff, mail, or using social media to advocate for their work. Now, that could work. I would say that using social media, to disseminate your work is a key one. But one of the things that you have to also know is that because people think that anyone can put information on social media, you really want to be sure and in putting information, especially for somebody to do it for you, that person should be seen as credible. Because luckily for us as researchers, people know we are credible. So when we put information out there, it becomes widely known. But we researchers should also learn to follow people, depending on the kind of social media we are using. If we follow people, we get more people in our network that when we put something out there, a lot more people are going to hear about it. But if we have colleagues who have large following, we can also use them to achieve the same purpose. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so more questions pouring in. So Adesa Onyekwalu saying, thank you for this lecture, sir. Please, I want to ask if there's a way to implement this media approach in rural communities, especially those that have limited access to technology.
Good question. I was born in a village in Ghana, so I do a lot of my research. Using, for example, radio. Radio is very popular. In fact, recently, a study that was done in Ghana actually shows that people in the rural communities tend to get higher exposure to radio than those in urban communities. Part of the reason is that when you look at radio, we have what we also call community radio. That is usually owned by community members. they speak the same languages and those things. So one strategy is to just know the kind of channel that is likely to catch the people in the rural areas. One of it is just radio, but also we can use community debats, festivals, and things like that to plan interventions and involve them. In fact, we designed a radio program in rural Ghana to encourage childhood nutrition. And when we were advertising it, for example, we use the markets to do a few, some of the actors did a few activity to them, and then they would tell them, so if you want to know more, listen to this radio at this time, and it works. So I think one strategy is to know what communication channels are people in rural communities more likely to be using, and then we use that. My late father was a town crier or a gong beater. So in the past, he will be going around the village telling people about what the chief want them to do. And as a kid, I will be following him because I didn't know in the end I may become a modern, journalist. But once we know the channels they use, we can do. But I would say easily one that could work very well in Africa is the use of radio, because if you look at the demographic and health survey, the only communication channel that bridges the urban-rural gap is
divide.
Divide is radio. I mean, like they are almost at par. If you look at newspapers, you find a high percentage of urban people reading newspaper, but rural, very small. Social media, very small. But radio, oh, they are just challenging them. So it's a great communication channel to use. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, there's another question from Dr. Kelechi Robinson. So she says, an organization that has a dedicated program on media Okay, my internet is unstable. So let me read it again. So it's Dr. Kelechi Robinson asking that if there is an organization speaking to a particular health issue, do you think this will help attract the attention of policy makers? And if yes, how can this be done?
Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry, you were breaking, but I think I got your last point that if there's an organization using media to address particular issue, as long as that organization is seen as credible and as a key stakeholder, it will be great, because there are some organizations that advocate on behalf of the voiceless. And so they have been doing this over the years. And if they happen to be using the media effectively, it will be helpful. Some of these organizations, for example, can end up, running a radio program on a particular topic where they can invite policymakers to come and talk about issues and things like that. So it's a matter of just knowing the kind of media that we have, and then the kind of information that we want to put out there, and then when we can actually implement that. Because as I said, timing can be very, very important as well. And yeah.
Okay, there's another question that says, is it necessary to make research findings suit the electoral interest of politicians? So for instance, do we need to portray the impact or implication of some of the findings of our research? Politician wins or loses the election?
Yeah, so thank you so much. Yes and no. Not all studies may have policy implications, right?
Yes.
But the good thing is that many of the health studies tend to have implications for policy. And if that is the case, then yes, we want to use the media to highlight the impact, the policy implications. Maybe the study indicate that a policy has to be implemented because even though the policy is in place, it's not being implemented, or if it is being implemented, it is not being implemented well. And as you know, in Africa, when it comes to policies, we don't have much problems, but it is the implementation that becomes an issue in many instances. So we can highlight the policy implications of a study. In fact, some journals actually require authors to indicate practice and policy implications.
And policy implications. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, there are more questions. So Dr. Jafar is thanking you for a wonderful presentation. And his question is on ethics. So he says, how do you balance the sometimes thin ethical line of advertisement and creating awareness for a program?
Okay, so this can be in two ways. So ethics, for example, may, in terms of scientific publishing, in general, we want to publish a paper in a journal, a manuscript in a journal before we want to disseminate the result to the media, like so people become aware. But sometimes, if we find that there is an effect that there is more public interest in it, sometimes we may have to consider letting the public know about it too. An instance is the issue of childhood, lead poisoning. There is a researcher in Michigan who blew the whistle on lead poisoning that was resulting from the water, water pipes in Michigan. And policymakers also became aware of that. But people were like, oh no, this has not even been published in a journal. This is not good science. Why do you have to publicize it? But in the end, the lady, they found out that it was very useful. She did that, right? So in some situations, yes, by ethics, we have to ensure that we can let the people know before maybe a study is published, but that is usually very rare. The other side, relate to like advertising that something that's cure everything and all those things, and we know it's not also not true. And so those things, regulators will have to do a very good job of ensuring that we don't advertise things that are not useful on using the media.
Okay. Another question is from Elijah Onoja, who says, can we use community leaders? Can we use youth leaders and the rest in this form of dissemination?
Yes, that is very useful. We can use them. We have something called, homophily, birds of the same feather flock together. So typically, if you want to engage community members and you even have some of those community members as part of your team, it becomes so easy. Sometimes we do a study before we go and look for those people, but no, it is helpful actually to get them involved in sometimes for part of the study. There are different levels of engagement. If we involve them and they are part of it, they can become what we call community champions for us. And then they can disseminate among their peers. And guess what? The leaders will then also provide the information to the people that they serve. So it becomes very useful. Yeah.
Okay. So Mercy Thomas is asking, she's thanking you for the wonderful presentation and says, is it not possible that we dramatize these messages since people don't easily forget what they see?
Yeah, so drama is a very effective strategy. I use drama in my research as well, but especially if it is a serial drama, because serial drama, how Africa, we tend to follow stories. So if you have episode 1 and the next episode follows the next one, the previous one, you know, somebody who want to know, so what is going to happen to Bernard next week? I have to follow him, you know? So things like that, it makes it easier for people to follow a particular story. So there has been a lot of drama intervention that have been found to be shaping behavior and also, I mean, positively, and have been found to be very useful. So yes, drama is good. Although I would say that if it is not done very well, you know, sometimes the entertainment supersedes the information, and that becomes
The
an issue.
information.
Yeah, so we have what we call edutainment, education and entertainment. If there's a good balance, it's good. But if you're not careful and it becomes more entertainment than the education, then there could be a problem.
Okay. So we have two questions for you that are within one phase. It's within the sphere of artificial intelligence. The first question says, is AI, which is artificial intelligence, going to have a huge impact on how we spread science? That's from Dr. Shamsuddin Aliyu.
Yes, yes, I would say yes. AI will be very effective in the future in terms of, and even now in terms of spreading science. Although I would say that we have to know who the audiences are. Okay, AI spreading information to, I mean, about science, the audience will have to be aware of who is providing the information, but also there are some contextualized information that ideally humans are going to be the one to provide that. So it's not going to replace that.
It's not going to be 100% reliance on AI, right?
Yes, yes, there will definitely be humans doing some work as well.
Yes, yes. Okay, so I'm happy this is going to be one area in human life that AI won't knock us out. So there's another question from Confidence Ejiofor, and she says, which is also related to the first question on AI. How can AI and machine learning algorithms be used to track and flag health misinformation across media channels? And what are the limitations of these tools in ensuring that only evidence-based information is promoted?
Yeah, I see that. Thank you. The use of AI would enhance consistency in messaging. Now, as to how evidence, the kind of evidence that is going to be used, of course, AI relies on the expertise that people already have. So it will mean that we have to ensure that the information that is being given, there is evidence about it. So there has to be some policing kind of on it so that we know the information that is being provided is true, because AI could be a double-edged sword. It could be used to also spread information that is not good, and that can be a problem. Yeah, but it can also be used for something very useful. So we have to be very careful in ensuring, and you know, information also varies. I mean, changes as we get more evidence. Sometimes, as you know, when the COVID hit, like in terms of wearing masks, and you know, now wear this type of mask. I mean, like it takes time and it's dynamic, and so AI will also have to be dynamic as time goes on to be able to provide information that will not be seen as not evidence-based.
Okay. Thank you so much. So we are at the top of the hour just by we overshot by 1 minute. So we want to thank you so much, Professor Appiah, for this great presentation. We feel like we should stay on. Maybe we should have made it 3 hours, but we'll bring you back. You know, you always be back with a different dimension of science communication. This is a big eye-opener. Many of us didn't know that there's a way to communicate our science. One last question from me. Policy brief. What's the best way to communicate a policy brief? Is it putting it in the journal? Is it putting it in a newsletter? Is it going on television? What's the best way? Policy brief.
Thank you so much. So with the policy brief, you know, the main audience or the priority audience for a policy brief typically is a policymaker. So the question is, if we put it in a place where policymakers are more likely to be found, then we are likely to be successful. So one strategy actually is to be involving staff of policymakers in their offices so that they get to them, because sometimes those people may also be great advocate for us. Policymakers themselves, we can also give it to them, but if we put it in a journal, for example, it's not likely, they may not likely find it. And when we have meetings with them, we can, like the way we have like, brochures or leaflets, we can go with them and they say, hey, there is this thing that, of course, some of them, you have to book an appointment. And when you go and you talk to them, then you follow up,
Yes.
you add your policy brief to it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Appiah, once again. Very, very interesting lecture. And thank you for everyone who joined today. I want to say thank you. Remember the link to our YouTube channel so that you can listen to this and share with your colleagues and friends. It's on the chat. And in December, we're going to have Pathways in Medicine. So Pathways in Medicine is a series where we bring healthcare professionals, mainly medical doctors who are not practicing medical doctors, but have diverged from their core career, which is clinical medicine, and they are doing something else. So look out for the e-flyers, look out for the information for the December webinar, the first Monday in December, where we're going to be having our Pathways in Medicine Part 3. Thank you so much and goodbye. Good night.
Thank you,
if you're
everyone.
on the African continent. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.